Welcome to day 13 of our Advent Devotional series. Today we look at the name Man of Sorrows.
Man of Sorrows. I think I know what you might say. What a dreary subject and a mournful theme at this time of year. But please stay with me. In the words of Charles Spurgeon, "Oh, it is not so, for great as were the woes of our Redeemer, they are all over now, and are to be looked back upon with sacred triumph. However severe the struggle, the victory has been won." The prophet Isaiah's writings are filled with prophecies. In one of his prophetic passages, he speaks of a man who would live a life of pain and hardship. We read in Isaiah 53:3, "He was despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not." This man of sorrows is Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit shows Isaiah a glimpse of the life of Jesus, of where he was rejected in his hometown, betrayed by people who loved him, and suffered for others. Most of his life was defined by hardship. He was born in a stable, sorrow received him, and only on the cross at his last breath did sorrow part with him. The culmination of his ministry was sacrificing his life as an act of substitutionary atonement. However, Jesus will ultimately return to earth, and this time not to suffer, but to rule and to reign. We have read of grief, we have sympathised with grief, and we have sometimes felt grief, but the Lord felt it more intensely than any other. He was a man of sorrows. He knew what it was like to experience pain. He felt the suffering and the hurt of a broken heart. It is interesting that the Bible never says Jesus laughed, although I'm sure he did, but it does say that he wept. Jesus knew the sorrow of rejection. What happens when the very people you are most trying to help have no use for you? Well, Jesus came to his own people in saving love, and most of them turned on him. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, verse 37, it tells us how, near the end of his earthly life, Jesus' heart broke as he stood on a hill outside Jerusalem, looking down upon the city. "How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing." He wept not so much for what they were doing to him, but for what their rejection of him would do to them. What sort of suffering have you known? Have you had the heart-stopping, gut-wrenching pain of a report bearing news of a death? The man of sorrows is acquainted with that grief. Have you ever experienced the agony of having someone whom you loved and trusted, who's failed you, betrayed you, rejected you and deserted you? Well, Jesus has too. When you commit your life to Jesus, you can claim for yourself the benefits of his life and death. You can identify with him and with his people suffering throughout the world. You can make it a priority, as the Apostle Paul said in Philippians 3:10, to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings. Becoming a Christian does not automatically solve all your problems or decrease your pain. On the contrary, it may actually increase your suffering. But what a relief it is to know that whenever sorrow comes to any of us, God both cares and understands. So this Christmas time, when it is assumed that you need to radiate joy, remember that it's okay to feel sorrow and pain, especially given what the last couple of years have thrown at us. To feel sorrow is to be human. But rather than letting that sorrow overcome you, remember that Jesus has experienced it all. He empathises with you, and he walks beside you through whatever in life comes your way.
We hope you enjoyed today's devotional. Tune in tomorrow for more in our Advent series.